Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the 10th reading in the series, the Livingroom series, online literary series. And eventually, once everybody gets in, I'll try to figure out how to turn the doorbell off so you don't hear it throughout. We have a really great reading today, and we're going to feature Keith Taylor coming to us from Isle Royale. We could say that anyway. No, coming from Ann Arbor, Isle Ann Arbor. We have Semaj Brown coming live from Flint, and we have Lisa Lenzo somewhere in Western Michigan, I believe. The readings are sponsored, as always, by the Detroit Writers Guild, Poets and Writers, and BookBeat Books. Is Semaj Brown. Semaj is a well-known poet from Detroit and worked out of Detroit for a number of years. She got married, moved to Flint. She is the first poet laureate of Flint, Michigan, actually. They haven't had one until Semaj moved up there. She's the author of poetry and prose collection, Bleeding Fire, Tap the Eternal Spring of Regenerative Light, which has been described, excuse me, I don't have COVID, as an odyssey in African-American history and culture. She launched the Poetry Pod Project, P3, which is her civic initiative to utilize poetry to enhance literacy. She started that in November 2019. We had her also on the All Access Cafe to thunderous applause, and it was just great. Her husband played instruments behind her, and it was wonderful. So please welcome to the online version of what we do these days, Semaj. You can unmute yourself. You should be, yeah, there you go.
Hello, beautiful people.
Hello.
Oh, wonderful. This is fantastic. Thank you, ML, for inviting me. I had such a good time last time. My husband did too. It was just fabulous. And listening to all the poets. And I really enjoyed your reading as well. It was wonderful. I just wanted to say that my work in poetry and prose, as well as in theater and in science, health education, is really dedicated to documenting and witnessing destruction survival cycle. The destruction survival cycle, that came to me this morning when I was preparing. And I thought, that's what it is. It's been going on for the last almost 500 years, about 450 years. It's the onset of capitalism in a new and vicious, brutal way through the transatlantic slave trade. And so I've been witness to the results. We're seeing it today, the continuation of this type of brutality that's been happening to African Americans and to allies of African Americans as we try to undo these systems. So this type of structural racism and classism, it started with race. That was an invention that was created to create and keep power and resources. We all know this. So it divided humans from humans, and also humans from everything. And so people often ask me, and they say, Semaj, I really like the way you use trees in your work, how you talk about trees, or how you talk about the ocean, and how you talk about nature. And that's an assumption that they're making, that I'm not a tree, and that I'm not the ocean, and that I am not nature. And by inference, They aren't nature either. So with that, I think I will begin with the poem Black Dandelion. Age 4, witnessed my first mow down. Twinkling ground stars cut by murderous lawnmower. Feeling the blade, I fell, curled like a snail in grief. 12 full moons folded into spring, perennial promises prevailed. Bees, oh the bees, they celebrated return of the dandelions in a skirt of twinkling yellow bliss. Flowering bouffants mirrored my spiky little afro. Jagged-edged lion's tooth leaves paid tribute to my snaggletooth smile. Me and my freedom-fighting flowers frolicked to survive the scissoring, the up-digging, the poisoning. Warning signs hovered like low-hanging clouds. No blooming allowed. Blossoms will be prosecuted. These brave plants, they grew just for me. Grew in spite of a society that favored a monochromatic landscape. 1965. Mr. Brother Malcolm X was assassinated. Big word for a pre-kindergartner. I was convinced he must have been a dandelion. Reverend King, too, and the Johnson boy, who lived one turn down the street that way. The Johnson boy was shot by the police for growing in a monochromatic landscape. Training wheels off, bike riding across insecure cement. I pedaled the bumpy path, waving solidarity to each surviving sunburst noggin, each fulfilling the promise to ornament lawn and flourish souls with lemon drop hope. Dandelion bear art of endurance and escape, transforming into pearl puffs, floating with ephemeral intention, carrying the spirit of the weed. 13 moons faded into July. I am a proud weed. Yes, I declared that shocking proclamation, standing in the pulpit on Youth Sunday, AME Vernon Chapel Church. I added to my speech on David and Goliath my impromptu improvisation of dandelion dogma. We are black dandelions who will never be destroyed. We grow the power of goodness for generations into the future. I yet remember the hat-framed faces of the pious, amused and mortified. So I thank you. Thank you much. I recognize the struggle of the earth to be my struggle. I am the earth. The coral reefs cannot breathe, and I cannot breathe. Do you see? Do you see? This next poem speaks to the destruction survival cycle I spoke of earlier from a plant perspective. It's called the after death of birth. It was inspired by a painting by my husband, James Brown, MD, who's an artist, a visual artist in the outsider movement. He also makes instruments out of tree limbs called arbor looms. And I don't know if you can see the painting or not. I'm going to move to the side. It's directly behind me and it's vertical. I don't know if there's a close-up enough of it, but it's abstracted floral. And there are lots of different colors of oranges and gold and green. Quite beautiful. And so I'm going to look into my book. I can show you my book right before I look into it, okay? This is called Bleeding Fire, Tap the Eternal Spring of Regenerative Light. And so I'm going to be reading the after death of birth. And it's Requiem for a Greenless Forest. To be the long-stemmed after death of birth, perennial justice of roots rising, merciful heroine of seeded kernels, propagator of unhatched blooms, to be the terminal gavel of passion, of nature, is to suffer passion, suffer nature, to suffer the perfection of grieving foliage is to hear constipated mulch of styrofoam polymers, is to suffer the echo. Hear the eulogy of rainforest choirs, fern homilies, rupturing throats of declining lilies, sorrow sighs of sagebrush. Hear the splitting girth of cactus seep acidic rain onto dying species. Hear trees sizzle shadows from the poach of extinguishing foresters. Hear earth malignantly distort into inoperative oxygen. I tell you, theirs is no ordinary passion. Green quest of survival, famously impaled as chlorophyll crucifix, rose petaled into industry exploitation's verdant blood. No, theirs is no ordinary passion. To perish seasonally, then resurrect in an ocean valley of extinction. To loiter beneath the solar stream of a depreciating planet. To expire in the threshold of reincarnations. To usher the descent and to rally the return. To hail the sapling rebirth. There we go. Thank you. Thank you so much. And so I did mention that my husband, one day, the funny story to me, I heard these sounds. They were very ethereal. They sounded like a cello. They sounded like an animal. They sounded like different things. And they were coming from my home in my basement. So I kind of creeped down into the basement, and there I saw all these tree limbs. We live in a semi-wooded area. All these tree limbs, and they were strung, and they were all different sizes. And my husband, he was down there just getting down. He was just playing it. So he had created all these different instruments called arbor looms. And in that moment, I thought about the over 4,000 lynchings of African Americans because I thought of trees. And I thought about our particular, very peculiar relationship to trees. Well, as humans, they give us oxygen, we breathe out CO2, right? Carbon dioxide, to take it in. We have this wonderful relationship. But then I thought about Black people here in America and trees. And that isn't what they were for. And I recognized them as sentient beings. And just recently, I was listening to NPR, and some biologists, some scientists, naturalists have proof now that trees live in communities and that they help each other survive through their systems, their systems that they have. And that whenever I used to see a tree just all alone by itself, I used to think of elephants. Just, elephants are in families. Trees are in families as well. And so I looked at this beautiful music and it's made of tree limbs, and I said, and I wrote the poem Freedom Tree that I'm going to read, and it became a song. And some of you know Jara McKinney or Michelle McKinney from the famous McKinney family. She sang this in one of the productions, our Bleeding Fire production at Charles Wright African American Museum. And boy, she just did it such justice. She's such a wonderful songstress. But I'm going to read it. And so it's called Freedom Tree Song. This tree is free. This tree is free. Free from hanging tombs and nooses as costumes. It walks and talks as witness a time that time can't forget this. This tree is life. It skinned the bark of strife, extends its hands as leaves to untangle the knots we breathe. This tree is friend. As air, it does command, so we may breathe, breathe, breathe. Breathe beyond the blows of history. Breathe into the wind of destiny. Breathe the fire from our eyes. Breathe breath into the child that dies. This tree is free. We grow perennial souls. We grow clouds as rain. We are sun-drying pain. My arms as branches, my heart expansive in the hearth of this earth. This tree is free. Making music, harmony. Thank you. So I'm going to read an excerpt. Thank you so much. I'm going to read an excerpt because I know people have started wanting me to read this poem called Mother Ocean every time I read, because they have told me it helps to heal them. And so I'm going to read a little excerpt of it. It's a long poem. It's called Mother Ocean. It talks, it's a character, a spiritual character that talks about when she first received her daughters through the transatlantic slave trade, when they went into the ocean, either thrown overboard or having jumped overboard from the brutality. And so I'm going to, Mother Ocean is speaking. I'm going to just read a little bit of that before I go on to something else. But because we're having, such a difficult time, the African American community, with 80% of persons being in ICU that have COVID, course, Native Americans are having a hard time, and Latinos as well, because of long-term health disparities. So now it's the reckoning has come, the reckoning of all of this years and years of abuse. So this takes place when Mother Ocean, she receives her daughters, and this is what she's saying she has done. She did. She said, I fashioned each death anew, molded feminine fluid into flesh, pooling ancient memories, floating in time. They were recreated from the scarring flow of centuries, formed by amniotic river that pulse their veins. They speak the language of water now, and water is spirit, and spirit remembers. I am the ocean spirit remembering when they cannot. Water is spirit, and spirit remember. I am the ocean spirit remembering when they cannot. My daughters came to me, Mother Ocean, as cargo in chains on death vessels that heaved frothy blood in the crest of my waves. My daughters came to me, Mother Ocean, shredding skin, decomposing wounds, fodder for sea monsters, and new world rapists. Millions, and billions collapsed into the inconceivable lap of violating current, descended to maritime grave, asphyxiated by the horror of what was yet to be suffered. But on my ocean floor, I rock them in the crucible of seaweed and succor, coddle them in the ebb of coral incantations, wash them with those two aquatic lovers, hydrogen and oxygen. I cleaned and christened, I purified, and I baptized their white bone skeletons into briny blessed assurance. And as ocean, I followed that tide of dripping gore across myself to the shore of servitude. I never left my daughters. I persisted in all my forms. Sometimes water vapor, whispering, dignity. Sometimes hailstorm, summoning strength of Ella Baker ancestors. I thought I'd just do an excerpt of that. It's a very long poem. And the last poem I'm going to do is called When Fools Talk to Me. I'm going to, yes. So I've written about this whole idea of microaggressions. And I've said, well, they're not micro at all, but I put it into a poem. It's called When Fools Talk to Me. Considering the present climate, I find myself adjusting spectacles a great deal as I encounter the latest absurdity du jour in a wave of microaggressions. The idea of the word microaggression is actually a double upside down insult, as there is nothing minor or micro about these aggressive assaults. One never knows when or why the next eyeglass adjustment will be necessary. Lunacy. And now I can say, and fascism seems to be mounting by the minute. So when fools talk to me, adjusting my glasses affords me the extra 2 seconds necessary to assess, think, compartmentalize, remain silent, or speak clearly, or be kind and compassionate, or breathe and breathe again, or run the entire U.S. history through my mind, flip cards bending and falling, or offer tutorials on systemic oppression, on systemic everything, or make a date to do lunch in between broadcast murders of unarmed Black men, or laugh madly at the absurdity just uttered to my face, or cry fire through my eyes, or consider becoming a recluse, or stab a coin in its heart, or jump wildly in thick air, push off the diving board of ignorance into another dimension. When fools talk to me, those 2 seconds of eyeglass adjustments give me the stillness required to pray, call on ancestors, talk to them about Sister Sandra Bland. Remember my training: light candles, expose illusions of power, make an incision, a topographical deconstructionist cross-section slit around the throat of fake democracy. You know, do a lobotomy on false scripture, carbon date the madness, know the lie, pardon the brainwashed messenger bearing toxins, for they know not what they say or do. Disengage, rally the angels, take cover, kaboom, false evidence appearing real because they know exactly what they do. Liquefy in ultraviolet brilliance, transform into the sun, a glowing cauldron, winged woman floating on an electric carpet above it all. When fools talk to me, those 2 seconds are perspective information, certainty lining up on Mercury, Saturn, satellites transmit gamma rays, energy to my private electromagnetic field as I sit in the neon sky on an infrared chariot in my corner office. As I walk down the street past a cave of buried choke-holding policy, and I slingshot, boomerang, slingshot, boomerang, slingshot, boomerang. 1 million microaggressions from my orbit, repelled like projectile vomiting over the indigenous rainbow, like a sports foul out of bounds that snags on edges of jagged clouds. And Ray Charles sings, "Hit the road, Jack. And don't you come back no more. Hit the road, Jack. And don't you, and don't you, don't you, and don't you, never, never, don't you. The axis of our planet straightens. untruths and pollute untruths that pollute bow down and disintegrate into the debris of a sneeze. Achoo! The atmosphere is activated. The moon, my ride and die, pulls water strings up. The sea high fives in wave gesture as hate evaporates. Gravity genuflects. There is a hierarchical reset. There is a hierarchical reset. There is a hierarchical reset. Nature is taking over. Me and Swag, oh, we dance around the shrinking fool. The fool sitting across from me, shrinking like reverse osmosis, shrinking like a wart in a TV advertisement. He is 1 foot tall now. The insulting, non-relevant, inconsequential fool, full of supposed unintended assaults. The microaggression maker to all things decent and good is the size of a dog biscuit now. 1/2 inch, 2 millimeters. Now I lower my eyeglasses and peer at this tiny, corrupted, ill-guided soul who once wore the smirk of privilege. I watch it rewind its birth until it disappears, vanishes, gone. All I need are 2 seconds. 2 seconds to adjust these spectacles. You see, when they talk to me, what? Magical things happen, like cosmic power things happen. But I need at least 2 seconds and some very large eyeglasses. Thank you.
Semaj Brown.
Thank you so
Wow.
much. Wonderful being here. Thank you.
Yeah, great performance. I loved it. Loved it. Thank you, Semaj. And her book, her newest book is or one, I think you have 2, but one was on Broadside Press, one of the new ones.
Yeah, this one is on Broadside and Health Collectors, and it's called Bleeding Fire. Tap the eternal spring of regenerative light.
So that's Broadside Press, and I'm sure Broadside Press books are at BookBeat. So I know they have key.
It's not at BookBeat. You can get this book on Amazon.
Well, there, but I think they may, because it's Broadside, they may actually have some at that particular store.
I know.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, good deal, man.
You can get it at Amazon.
Yeah, it's out there and it's worth looking into. It's quite good. Thank you, Semaj.
Thank you so much.
The next